So when you look at the chapter PED, probably PED or XED and YD, these questions comes a lot in exams. So if you look at, in fact, the recent years, you'll find this, that probably the most tested topic is going to be elasticity of demand, of supply, and XCD-YD. So for me, I think it's a very important topic to prepare. And in fact, what if you can ask me, so demand supply theory, and then this one, elasticity, and the government intervention is like a topic that gets tested so often that we need to sort of prepare this whole chunk in one go. Make sense? So make sure when you're preparing for the November exam, you prepare this whole chunk in one go. I'll send you guys the notes as well. So for me, these are for chapters 4, 5, and 6 from my notes. Okay, so I'll email you guys these notes as well after the class. So chapter 4, 5, 6, for example, is really important for us. So this is chapter 5 in my notes, which talks about the XCD, YD, and PED. And I'm just going to open those notes as well while we sort of discuss these questions. So the first question that I want to discuss is the one which talks about the PED. And let's look at this one. What are the factors that affect the price elasticity of demand for a product? So in this kind of a question, simply you need to remember you have 8 marks. So 8 marks means 8 times 2, you have sort of 16 minutes to answer. The rule of thumb when you are answering any question in your A levels is that 1 marks is roughly 2 minutes. And that holds true for both MCQs and for paper 2. So 1 marks is basically 2 minutes. So you got to remember that rule. Okay. So what are the factors that affect price elasticity demand for a product? The first thing I'm going to talk about is that I'll define PED, right? Then I'll talk about the formula for PED. Okay, formula is a must here as well, and I'll talk about this in 1 minute. And then we talk about the next thing we talk about is the other factors. Okay, so let's talk about first the definition. What is the definition of PED? Well, simply PED is the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price. So like it is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. We have to mention that like the formula, because the examiner report, you'll see mentions that those who give the formula will get 1 mark for that. Make sense? If you have any questions, you can sort of write it in the chat box, or even like unmute yourself and ask me the question. So you totally open to do that, or allowed to do that. The next thing we talk about is basically also like a little bit about, like after mentioning the formula, you can talk about what do we mean by elastic versus inelastic. Elastic basically mean your PED, price elastic demand, is greater than 1. And inelastic basically means your PED is less than 1, which means percentage change in quantity demanded is more than percentage change in price, right? So the quantity demanded is more responsive to a change in price, while in this case, you can say percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price, right? So this is more responsive. This is more responsive versus this is less responsive, right? Then we talk about the factors. What are the factors that make a good sort of, or that affects the elastic demand? So if I could quickly ask you guys, what are the factors that make the elasticity of demand to, or what are the factors that affect PED? Anyone who can tell me that?
Sir, the type of product, like whether it's a luxury good or normal good.
Okay, that's one thing. Anything else?
Price of the product.
Price of the product, that's not really a factor, no?
The quality.
Substitute
Sorry,
and complementary.
or the
Availability of
substitutes.
substitutes.
So let's first talk about the more important one for me is the idea that whether you have close substitutes and or not. So the first factor that affects elasticity is number and closeness of substitutes. This is the first important point, because the higher the number of substitutes, or the closer the substitute you have to your good, the more similar you are to another product that is out there, the more you will say elastic your demand will be. Similarly, the lower the number of substitutes, the lower the number of substitutes and the more unique the product as compared to competitors, one would argue that more inelastic will be the demand. Okay, so that's the first factor. A good example of this could be, like in the cola market, you have Coke and Pepsi, but Coke and Pepsi are cold drinks, right? Are basically what we call fizzy drinks. So one could argue this, that when it comes to the market for fizzy drinks, there is Coke, Pepsi, there's Fanta, there is Sprite, and so on and so forth. There are more players out there. But in the cola market, you have very few substitutes, which is Coke and Pepsi. So while Coke and Pepsi are two players in the cola market, but when it comes to fizzy drink market, the category becomes bigger. You have more substitutes available. But if you look at from the cold drink market or drinks that are cold market, you will have even like juices that will be competing with Coke and Pepsi as well. So the idea goes this, that the more you look at substitutes, the higher the number of substitutes, and the closer they are, and the less closer they are, the more elastic will be the demand. Less closer would mean, more closer, I'm sorry, more closer they are, the more will be the elasticity. More closer means basically how close are you as compared to another product. If you are very close to another product, it's going to be very easy for consumers to switch to the other product. So if you are somebody who drinks, for example, cola, you might find Pepsi to be a substitute, but if you have a strong brand loyalty, maybe you might not. Okay, so how closely you believe a product is a substitute also matters when it comes to your elasticity. The next point, which basically determines the PED, so this is number one. Number two is basically whether the good is a necessity, somebody said this, necessity or luxury. What are necessities? Necessities are goods which are important for survival. Important for survival. And if they're important for survival, then one would argue this, that it's really difficult for us to switch to any other product. For example, demand for example, vaccines is inelastic, or demand for example, those who are diabetes patients, they get the medication for their diabetes, to control their diabetes. One would argue this, that would also be inelastic. Similarly, demand for water could also be argued to be inelastic. That could be a reason why that could make the good to be inelastic as well. Makes sense? Luxury, on the other hand, are not important for our survival, and one would argue this, that you may not need to sort of worry about it in that manner, and therefore you can easily switch, or you may, if the price goes up, you may actually decide not to buy the goods to begin with, or to move away to another good easily. Make sense, guys? Any questions before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
What's
sir.
any other factor that you guys can think of? If you can tell me.
So what about the price of complements?
Oh, that isn't that the price of complements in that's a demand side factor. We're looking at right now. We're looking at basically your elasticity factors. Elasticity. So there's a common mistake we all normally do, which is we end up mixing elasticity with your with demand supply. So this is more elasticity. So anything that is to do with elasticity, anyone? There are other factors as well.
Sir,
Yeah,
can the proportion of income spent on the good
exactly. Good
be
job.
an example?
Good job. That's exactly what I was looking for. So proportion of income spent. Proportion of income spent means um, is is the good expensive or not as compared to your income. If you end up spending a large proportion of your income, and I think somebody said the price of the good, saying price of the good may not be a good answer. Saying proportion of income spent is a good answer. So if you are somebody who spends a very large proportion of your income on a particular good, then that good becomes for you, that is kind of like a normal good. But also that's the good is such that once the price of that good goes up, you will be very, very sensitive to it, and you might cut down quantity demanded much more. So the larger the proportion of income spent, let me write this, the larger the proportion of income spent, the higher will be PD, will be the PD, or the more elastic will be the demand. Do you guys get that? Does that make sense? So larger proportion of income spent will make the good to be more elastic. So
Sir, so this means that less disposable income will be spent on the good.
I would say less income. Disposable income means income after tax, but less income, yes. Uh, the more income you spend on a good, the more you will be like, hey, the good is becoming expensive. I should move on to its substitute. Okay. Then comes the once we determine necessity. Then comes also sometimes the nature of the good. When you say nature of the good basically means, is it sort of habit forming or not? If it's a habit forming good, one would say it will be very inelastic. Why? Because people will find it difficult to switch. People will find it difficult to switch, and they might be okay to pay a higher price for it if the price goes up. A good example of this is that, like, I love broccoli in my eggs, and like sometimes the price of broccoli goes up because of like weather changes or whatever, and I'm willing to pay more, or I do not really vary my demand by that much because it's for me. I love my eggs with broccoli, for example. Like, so for me, it's a habit forming good. Similarly, someone would argue this, that a lot of people who are spending on advertising and all that are building brand loyalty, and the fact that they're building brand loyalty is primarily with the idea that if it becomes a habit forming good, if you're hooked to it, you will not be really willing to switch that easily. So it becomes as an advantage for you as a firm in that manner. Okay. Last point which we want to sort of mention here is basically to do with time period. So time period matters a lot as well. And the time period argument is simply that the longer the time period involved, let me write this, the longer the time period. So for example, if I give you like few days versus few months, so the longer the time period, the easier it is for consumers to switch. And when we argue, the higher will be the price elasticity of demand, PED. So if I give you like 2 days to switch, you might not find it easy to switch. If I give you many, many months to switch, you may find it easy to switch. And therefore, your elasticity is also going to depend on basically, like your elasticity of a good will depend on that too. Make sense, guys? Any questions? Anything that
Mm. Sir, the time period means that the time taken to receive the good?
No, the time taken to for you to switch to another substitute.
Okay.
So for example, let's say if you consume something, if you consume something and you really like it, and if I say, hey, stop consuming it, you'll be like, but I like the good, I have it every day, but let's say the price keeps on going up, you might find a substitute, and in few months you might switch easily. You may not switch in 2 days, you may switch in other words, you can alter your consumption pattern with a longer time period under consideration. So we can alter, that's a way to say it, we can alter our consumption pattern. Make sense? Okay, so guys, this is an answer for this question. Please, why we lose marks in this one is when we start to mix the demand factors with PED factors. PED and demand factors are different. So, like complement substitutes and all those things, that's your demand factors and not your PED factors. Okay, now I want to now look at another kind of question which comes so often that we need to prepare for it.
Sir,
Yes,
I
yes,
have a question related to the last question.
yes, please.
How would we conclude the answer?
This is not a conclusion question because it's an 8-mark question. It's more like explain question. So in an explain question, you don't have a conclusion per se. And
So
in
we
a
just leave it
yeah,
as
yeah,
factors. Okay.
exactly. If you really want to write, you can say these are the factors that affect the PED of a good, for example. You can say it like that if you want to. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Sir, can we draw the diagrams if we want to?
Yeah, the diagram maybe you can talk about, like a diagram that I can draw here could be this one. You can, while you're giving your formula, you can draw a demand curve diagram. Let's say I make a diagram like this one. 1 minute. Yeah, you can say this, that you can make P naught, P1, and you can show minus 10%. And let's say Q naught, Q1. There's no need for a diagram, by the way, but let's say we do that plus 5%. Yep, so we will have PD equal to minus plus 5% over minus 10% or minus 0.5. Okay, so you can have something like this. Okay, now I want to move to a question which comes a lot often in terms of PED. There are two kinds of questions we can look at. The one where PED is related to revenue. So PED and revenue. Okay, and the second part of the question is PED is related to a discussed question that comes, which is that can we affect PED? So I'm going to talk about that in a little later discussion. But let's first talk about PED and revenue. Let's read this question. This came in March 19. This came in India. So this is India's paper. Where I think in March they have exams. So explain how the knowledge of goods PED can help a business to assess the effect of price changes for that good and on its revenue. Okay, so let's discuss that part. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we go to move on. So first, we define what is PD, right? We've already done that. We know this. We talk about the formula, right, which is percentage change in quantity demanded. We talk about what is elastic versus inelastic, right? Elastic is greater than 1, more responsive, inelastic is less than 1. And then we talk about revenue. Revenue is simply price times quantity. And you can draw the diagram like this one, right? We can draw a diagram like this one while we're explaining revenue. And we can say this, that P naught times Q naught could be a revenue. So if price is like $10 times, let's say quantity is 5, you're looking at revenue to be $50. Makes sense? So we can draw a diagram like this one. Okay. But then we come to the part which is basically, so this part, by the way, all of this will give me 4 marks. This is an 8-mark question. All of this will give me 4 marks. The definition, the formula, the revenue definition, the diagram, and so on. But the next 4 marks will be basically discussing the effect of price changes for that good on its total revenue. Okay, so knowledge of PED, we will say this. Am I good to move on? Is there any question, guys? So PED is useful in determining revenue due to a price change, right? How is it useful? Well, we say this, that if, for example, the good is elastic, this means percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than percentage change in price. So the good, so small change in price will lead to a large change in quantity demanded, or a change in price, or a change in price will lead to a proportionately large change in quantity demanded. And that basically means, from a firm's perspective, when the firm is selling something elastic, and when they lower the price, the quantity will rise by much more, and that will make my total revenue to go up. So for a firm that is selling an elastic good, they should be, when a firm is selling an elastic good, they should be lowering the price to increase total revenue. Okay. Similarly, what we could argue this, if it's an inelastic good, then what we could argue this, that percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price. Isn't that true? In that case, guys, percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price. We say this, that an increase in price will make the quantity to fall by much less, and that will make my total revenue to go up. So if you are selling something inelastic and you want to increase your total revenue, you need to increase the price. Okay. And we can make, by the way, make 2 diagrams here. If you feel like making the diagram, it will always give us more marks. I can make a flatter curve for elastic, where I am lowering my price from P0 to P1. And I can say this, that total revenue will rise by much more. This is the total revenue after. This is the total revenue before. Clearly, this area in green is much more less than this area in purple. as the quantity is rising by much more, making the total revenue to go up. Okay, so you talk about that. On the other hand, you have a case like this one where you have an inelastic demand, and here when you are lowering your price, I'm sorry, we should increase the price. When we increase the price, we can see the quantity did not change by that much, and that's why you are able to make more revenue than before. And you can, by the way, because they're saying, explain how the knowledge of PED can help you, and you can say this, that however, last case you can talk about, however, if you have a unitary elastic demand curve, because if you have a unitary elastic demand curve, for anyone, what will happen if you have a unitary elastic demand curve?
will
So
not
it may be a straight line.
No, it won't be a straight line. Anyone else? What would happen when you have a unitary elastic demand? Total
going to
revenue?
have a
Proportionate.
concave curve.
We will have a convex to the origin curve, but we have a what we call, this is called a rectangular hyperbola. We call this curve rectangular hyperbola, which basically means, mathematically, it means that when your price goes down, let's say by 10%, quantity will increase also by 10%. So one would argue this, guys, that the revenue will be unchanged. So guys, this is before, this is after, and we say this, that P naught times Q naught is equal to P1 times Q1. So total revenue will be unchanged. Got it? And that's why in this case, one would argue this, that if you know you have a unitary elastic good, then a change in price won't change revenue. Okay, so you talk about that in this as well. So in this question, by the way, so first I talk about, so the knowledge of PED is useful, yes, because then you can change your price accordingly. For inelastic good, you increase your price. For elastic good, you decrease your price. For unitary elastic good, you may not be able to change revenue to a change in price. Okay, are we good? So this is the second kind of a PED question that we need to know, which is where we're using our knowledge. Another kind of question that I want to talk about, which is going to be important, is basically to look at let me find that question exactly, because that will be making our discussion complete. If you have any question in the meanwhile, please let me know. Yeah, this one is the third kind of like a question that we need to prepare really well, which is discuss why entrepreneurs might want to change the price elasticity of demand for their products and consider the extent to which this is achievable. So the question is asking us, why do entrepreneurs want to change the PED of the good? Make sense, guys? Why do they want to change the PED of the good? Number one. Number two is basically, when they do change the PED of a good, then basically, I mean, how much is their ability, do they have the ability to change the PED of a good? Okay, so that's a good question to prepare for. So first of all, guys, if I ask you, why do entrepreneurs want to change the PED of the good? Anyone?
So to increase revenue.
To increase revenue, very good, because we just saw that if your good is inelastic, you can increase your price, and that could make your PED to go up. That's very good. Anything else? Anyone? What could be usefulness otherwise? So when you say
So what
inelastic,
about competition?
what about competition?
Like to be more competitive?
To be more competitive. So what would you want to have then? You want to make the good more
Like
inelastic or elastic?
inelastic. Like if it's inelastic, then the quantity demanded won't change.
The quantity demanded won't change. So when it's a link to revenue, so that's one point where you want to sort of make the good more inelastic, uh, and that basically is useful because, as we said, that you can you can make the revenue go up. So let's first talk about that. If demand for a good were inelastic, one would argue this the total revenue will rise, um, and um, and therefore one could argue this that this could be useful, but there could be other usefulness in terms of like when it comes to the good being uh, inelastic. Also this means that it's something which has a strong sort of brand loyalty. Isn't that true? So why entrepreneurs might want to change the elasticity could be to create strong brand loyalty, which basically, despite any sort of more competition to come, you might not see people to switch that easily because you have an inelastic good. You know, um, so like a brand which is like an Apple or iPhone knows that even if more competition come, a lot of people may still buy my good because I have something which is inelastic. Um, so that could be another reason why one would want to make the good to be more inelastic. Um, and then also, like if you look at it from the perspective, so entrepreneurs might want to change the price elastic demand for their products. Could also be to do with, so one is the revenue part, total revenue, which is basically your price goes up, your quantity will fall by much less, and that's why you can make it more inelastic. And that's why being more inelastic can basically make your total revenue to go up. So we've got one point. Second is brand loyalty. Is there any other point that can give us any advantage to make it more inelastic? So as compared to competition, we've already mentioned that competition. So competition may find it difficult to compete with us because we have a strong brand loyalty. Also, we are considered as a good that could be, you know, like a necessity sometimes because people strongly want to sort of buy our good. Make sense?
So can it be that we might be able to make a monopoly?
Being inelastic means that you will have a possibility of uh, possibility of a monopoly power. Yes, you can say that. You can have a strong market sort of power, but monopoly monopoly's definition is basically when you are a good which um, has a larger market share. So yes, there could be a possibility that you are able to do that. Uh, we need to now talk about, guys, also the extent to which this is achievable. Consider the extent to which this is achievable. So is it achievable for us to change our elasticity of demand? And the answer is, how easy it is to change our elasticity demand.
So it depends on the type of product that we are selling.
So one is basically our good could become inelastic by few things. Number one, it's features. You know, like the more unique the product. I remember I've talked about unique. The more unique the product, the more you will be able to stand out as compared to your competition, and therefore the more inelastic will be your good. Number one is that. Number two feature that one could argue this that can make it more inelastic could be advertising. Advertising can basically also market people sometimes that the good is unique and help us build brand loyalty.
So you're talking about the unique selling point.
Yeah, unique selling proposition that you might have. Also the fact that, you know, like if you look at, for example, in the cell phone markets, you have many players, but Apple has a sort of image that they are making something which is completely different from others. It may not be the case in reality, but that's what people feel. So that could basically make a good to be more inelastic. Make sense? So how close people believe your good is as compared to other goods, and if you're able to sort of do that, you could be considered as a good with an inelastic demand. Make sense, guys? Are we good? So in other words, when you go back to the features that we were talking about initially, you know, if you're able to basically make it easy for people, uh, make yourself completely unique as compared to other people, your good will be inelastic. One could argue the proportion of income spent. You know, the lower the price may be, the more inelastic the good, because the lower will be the proportion of income spent. So if your good is cheap, for example, maybe yes, you can make it inelastic, but it may sometimes not be in your control because you might be making a good that may not have a lower price, or maybe still a higher proportion of income spent. Make sense? If it's a necessity, of course, then you can make the good, the good would be considered as an inelastic good. Similarly, if it's a good that you know can become habit forming, uh, then that would make the good to be more elastic. But all of this means your successful advertising may need to play a role here. Make sense? Are we good?
Sir, so do we need to make graphs for in this question?
In this questions,
What?
in this question, no, you don't need to make graphs. This is more about a discussion question. So
Okay.
your conclusion matters here. Somebody was asking me conclusion. This is just 1 minute, guys. So your conclusion would matter here because here you could say this: the ability of a firm may be limited. However, with products unique features, it can basically stand out as compared to its competitors. Yes, we have a question here. Anyone? Questions, guys?
Sir, inelastic, is it like something inelastic demand is solving necessity?
Is in what? Sorry.
Um, like I think the inelastic demands are most, I mean, luxury is good, not necessary.
No. Luxury goods can be easy. You can easily switch from necessities to luxury. I mean, luxury you can easily switch, right? Like for example, if I don't give you a Prada bag, will you be able to survive? Will you be will your life go on? Yes, right?
So can you say it again?
So if I give you a designer bag, if I don't give you a designer bag, your life will go on, right? There won't be any problem.
Yes.
So one would
Yeah.
argue this that, therefore, one would argue this that it's not really important. You can easily, if the price of a designer bag go up, and you are still willing to buy that good because you're really important for your survival, then basically it's not a luxury good, it's a necessity for you. But normally
Okay.
luxury goods are those that you can easily alter the consumption of them. Make sense? Okay, guys, I'm
Yeah.
done. I want to keep a class with you guys, not on the weekend because you guys have your exams coming very soon. So I'm going to have a class with you on Tuesday, okay? And I'm going to send you an email about the timing and the idea of it. But Tuesday, roughly in the roughly 4 p.m. Pakistan time is what I'm planning to teach in the class. So I'm going to tell you guys probably by tomorrow the exact time of that class. Okay. Uh,
Sir, I had a question.
yes, please.
Sir, in this question, can we write that the lifestyle of the consumer, like if the consumer thinks that the luxury goods is necessary for him or her, so it will
It
make it
could be
more
possible,
innocent.
but the way I want you to phrase it would be basically, like if a consumer believes the good is a necessity for him, then the good will be inelastic. So what you're trying
Okay.
to say to me is this, that your definition of necessity versus my definition of necessity may be different, and that answer is yes.
Yeah.
For example, for me, eating, for example, broccoli is a necessity, and it might not be for you. Make sense?
Okay.
So
Yes,
that's
sir.
what it is.